Manimela tracola masani yang wasani manaman. Puyani purato motani haramas. Aingorani basit kinororasak nilerero.
Kolonia town is the economic and social center for the island of Pohnpei. It is its own municipality, although it didn't start out that way. This video details the development of Kolonia over the years, from ancient times to the present. It tells a unique tale of how a group of people helped form a new municipality that was not originally defined by the traditional chiefdoms of Pohnpei. It is a tale that begins as most good tales do, steep in legend. So, let us begin there. Before Western contact, the area that Kolonia town now occupies was known as Meseniang to the Pohnpeians. Meseniang literally means face of the wind, or perhaps headwind. But to Pohnpeians, the name has a much richer spiritual connotation. A quiet area undisturbed by the whaling ship activities that was generally found in the Kichi and Madalanim harbors of the middle and late 19th century. Meseniang held a certain religious awe, and at least one shrine to a local god was erected. Legends concerning the peninsula abound, but the most popular one is the Song of Luke. The Book of Llewellyn tells the tale of Luke. It states, when Luke died, his spirit went everywhere, walking on and under the seas, and going to the lands abroad and the lands nearby. When the voyage was over, the spirit returned to Luke, and he returned to life. He then composed the song, Men Melaja Kola Meseniang Wasan Nanaman, to describe his spirit's travels. It goes like this.
I just want to die and go to Meseniang, the place of magic power, so I might come back and sit as a light person. My voice of the underworld, at the cracked sound, a trembling accent. I will come back later and go to Namair, harbor of Meseniang.
There are other legends that take place in Meseniang. There is the legend of Karaselang and the story of Waragitam, to solidify early beliefs that Meseniang was a magical place. But Meseniang became more than just a place from which legend sprang. It has remained a center of religion, from early local god beliefs to a seat of the Protestant and Catholic churches. Today, there are at least 12 churches in the area. It is a place named symbolic of life and death and resurrection. Hence, it is not surprising that foreign churches and shrines have been permitted to be built in the region, whether they were Protestant, Catholic, Mormon, Jehovah's Witness, or even, as during the Japanese administration, Buddhist. The region also became the capital of Spanish and German operations on the island. Japan and the United States used the area for their capital during their presence, and now Pohnpeians govern from it. Kolonia town also served as the capital of the Federated States of Micronesia when the country first became a nation in 1984, and the first FSM Congress and presidential administration was housed in buildings in Kolonia before it moved to Palikir in 1987. The Pohnpei Coastal Resources map places Meseniang at the shoreline, about where the old docks were, the present site of the PAMI building. Yet, there is other evidence that indicates Meseniang could have been a mythological place and not physical at all.
Kolonia o Meseniang Kolonia o Takakau Micronesia alai no Korea. Meseniang eten atalapin Kolonia amia tutun kai wasa tawanu kai longo wasang masih sapung masaki yosiaga ko yo len kapin pilo rai kintane nakano asang mo koto kota bil me kuskus tisang tol kutoran nangkapin koto wasai pat patri ra i nangkapin koto wasau we au tau tolong mamangi sang niat napa kolong to lel yosie au tau tata koi masaki panangan alo pon au tau tata koi poroi wasai ya tandrian ro apa memimu Pilmon kisin mesin peten sut tau takas mimi lumah la nanti wasa kokoto kokolongoto lel wasa isonan kene materi koto changmo sintaga ke wasa true value milari rangote sintaga watanki tagantum torore ya rutape kokosanien auto-talang taka kotile sto wasa station in Chevio mie I tinoro varmon so mappe la poito koto porto nanche penwa wasa imposokan yawiye mon panuelo koto ke sisio koto porto mamuisto katin konati sai auto tala panangan nangkuman
Politically, after the fall of the Saudalors, sometime between the 14th and 16th centuries, Messenium fell under the control of the ruler of Nech, after the Zonkawat clan secured control over Nech and Sokez. Nech became part of Sokez, but by the time the Spanish had arrived in 1887, Nech had again become a separate entity, and Lepen Nech administered control through the Sowan and Nechup. The area's appearance began to change when in 1865 to 1867, Protestant missionaries from the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Missions established a small mission, and in 1871 a sawmill along Caporeso. They called the place Cannon. To the Pohnpeians it became Cannon. And for the next 70 years, foreigners from Spain, Germany, and Japan would transform Messenian into a foreign place where Pohnpeians weren't always welcomed, and renamed it La Kolonia, then Die Kolonia, Kolonia, and finally Kolonia Town. On April 2, 1947, the United Nations established Micronesia as a strategic area, and it was given to the United States to administer under the trusteeship agreement between these two parties. In May 1947, all of Micronesia was encouraged to develop a municipal government system. On July 18, 1947, U.S. President Harry Truman signed and approved the delegation of authority and responsibility of administration of these islands to the Secretary of the Navy. Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, Admiral Louis Denfield, was commissioned as the first Naval High Commissioner of the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands. In June of 1951, the Navy transferred authority to the United States Department of the Interior, which administered the Trust Territory for the next 25 years. Under the Navy, schools, roads, and hospitals were rebuilt on Pohnpei. New government offices were constructed, and Kolonia Town began to be a center of economic and social activity for the people of Pohnpei, not just the foreigners who lived there. But the Navy and the Interior Department wanted the island economy to be self-supporting. They wanted islanders to take control of their own businesses and develop them. All of the lands that were taken by the Japanese administration became Navy land, or public land, and businessmen in Kolonia were given leases to properties in the commercial center for town to open up businesses. It was at this time that families that owned land in Kolonia began to develop the town. Stores, bars, and theaters were built along the main street, now renamed Casalelia Street. A U.S. post office and the Bank of Hawaii opened up, and the town began to resemble a Western-style frontier town like those that cowboys used to live in during the Old West, as the United States began to develop its western frontier.
Oh yes, it's really different than it is. Only few stores. Not much, because I can remember to have a store before. Excite, they have a store. Leo, they have a store. But not like today, yeah? It's old time before. Now they fix it up. That's where Leo has a small store, not really big one, because he just started. That's where he first started over there. And then after that, Carlos, same place where he built. Carlos is way up, but before is down. Napa, Amie, Gam Wapiu Koyelao, Kamakoyelao, Amas, Gami Wasame, Emie Mas
Carlos
Rap transfer Samo, Aput Kotala Palio, Kolala Pio, Ivasa, Mas, and second. Kotala metaleni mapesong aksinale. People just make to walk in there, just to go to somebody's houses and like that. But not like now when my brother was fixing the road. That before he was working with the PTA. He was working with PTA. That's the time they start making the road, going around.
Everybody knew that Kolonia was a special place. I mean, it is the center, the first urban center. It has over the, over time has been developed as the urban center. That's where people came together, for commerce, for school, especially for going off island, getting drunk. You came to Kolonia. I mean, that's where the action was.
With the development that the Trust Territory period brought to the island, there also came a migration of people from the outer islands of Pohnpei for reasons of school and jobs. People came from Mokilla, Pingilap, and Kapingamarangi. In fact, people from all outer islands began migrating to the main island and looked for a place to settle down. Kolonia Town was the most logical choice for these communities, as it was close to the schools and to where the jobs were located. Migration wasn't new to these people. During the German period, after the Sokez Rebellion, outer islands were given the land around Sokez Island and communities from Pingilap, Ngachuk, and Mokil settled in, but other communities formed in the Kolonia Town area. The most well-known of these communities is the community of Peonrakiet. This community first began to settle in Kolonia Town due to a shortage of workers for the Nambu Company during the Japanese administration. People from Kapingamarangi were brought up to Pohnpei as contracted laborers, not settlers. The decision to relocate consists of the decision by the Japanese governor on Pohnpei to grant a piece of land to the people of Kapingamarangi for their use while any of them might be residing on Pohnpei. The grant was in the form of a long-term lease, and later the U.S. Navy upheld the lease, which continues today. At this time, Kolonia Town still fell within the borders of Nech municipality, as it had from when Spain first arrived. All development of Kolonia and the prominent business people that lived and worked in Kolonia, along with the newcomers, the communities of outer islanders began to want more control and say from their government. In the 1950s, the Nech district government was collecting all of the taxes and deciding on which public projects to fund. A feeling of taxation without representation was beginning to build up in the people of Kolonia.
Generation of revenue during those days I thought was quite heavy. They felt like what it happened subsequent to those years, it also happened to the Micronesian governments. And that was the same reason why Marcelo split from the Federation. It was of, again, the division of revenue sharing.
There were a few men, such as like Vitor Harris, Mr. Yamauchi, and I think that time was also Cayus. I think these were the people that got together and said, you know, since Kolonia town was collecting more revenues at that time, it's really unfair that they're just getting most of the revenues. So I think that kind of prompted the idea of separating from net. Well, again, it's really a matter of saying, wait, you know, we're doing the work, and somebody else is benefiting from it. And so we want to do the work, and we benefit from it. And that is because of the location, because the town, there were a lot of businesses established here. And so people who lived here, what they say, Kolonia, they know that they will benefit more if they're separated from the other, I would say, separated from, I would say, the rural area of net as a whole. So they say, well, if we're separated, then we can control the revenues and benefit more from the revenues, instead of giving it into a pot where all of us would share. The people would have more control and more say on what the revenues would be spent on. And in a sense, you know, they want to control what they have, what they will collect, and what kind of projects do they want to accomplish, instead of waiting for the other government to dictate what will happen in this municipality of Net.
Economics wasn't the only motivation for the people of Kolonia. As residents of Net municipality, the people of Kolonia town were also obligated under the traditions of Pohnpei to pay tributes to the Nanmarki. For the outer island communities, this was difficult as they followed a different culture with different traditions, and they felt that it should be an option, not a requirement of the people of Kolonia town to join in Pohnpeian traditional ceremonies. And so a movement began for the people of Kolonia to seek independence from Net municipality.
They happy, you know, for separating from them, because their rule, you know, it's, they don't like, you know, what did they want them to do, something like that. And especially lots of outsider people in Kolonia, and they don't really know how to Pohnpei customs, like maying up a song, like something like that. So that's why they want to separate, because lots of different peoples from outsider. That's what they stay here in Kolonia. So they don't like those kind of customs.
Because of the cultural barrier that outer island people and the Pohnpei people have. They have different cultures, traditions, languages, and so that's a big barrier. And I think that's
that's one of the main drivers of why Kolonia wanted to separate from Net.
But who was really behind this movement? Who were the men and women who were responsible for the work that caused the movement to succeed? Fortunately for us, some of them are still around and remember the work that was done.
Edwin and Bethwel was the key player. He's not a very controversial person, but in making sure that the leaders then were able to think, able to make the best of what was available to them.
I think it's partly motivation and partly I was forced into it. I lived in Kolonia since 1948 and I knew the development of municipalities when the charter program from the TTPI government chartered many of these municipalities. When Kolonia wanted to become a separate municipality, there were forces against that. And it's mainly from Net. But these were, I need to parenthetically say that these forces were not force armed or things, but they were very peaceful and mostly debating so people were legal movement or whether this should be authorized or should not be authorized. So when we were called by the mayor and the council of Kolonia, there were some of us that lived in Kolonia and they want us to write this petition to the High Commissioner requesting that Kolonia become a separate municipality. They called some of us that were living in Kolonia. Some of us were residents of Kolonia. Ito Harris was a resident of Kolonia. Also Yamata was a resident of Kolonia. Takasi worked in the land office, lived in Kolonia. I lived in Kolonia. Case Kalyam, also from Pegalab, and he lived in Kolonia. So we were asked to be two members of a committee that would draft that petition or request to the High Commissioner for Kolonia to be a separate municipality. So we did, and I think Martin Christian was the mayor at the time. We did, and we wrote that, and it was signed by the mayor and the council members.
The Chamataman, Maye, Bethwel Henry Young. Apmoon Bethwel Henry, Araik Henry. Sotamagot can gak market nan Kosan and main Mokilkan, Araik Sotapan, so was it. Bill Neamon Clarence, Olin Marcelo, napaput the Pohnpei, Nolan Kita, Stowa, Bill the Talk and Kolonia Town Government, Yale Minute, Olin Namanam Minute, Licken Wayne FSM, Licken Wayne Pohnpei, Mayang Chongata, O Makmakitiki, Kam Campaign Ki, Aramas and Patola Lucious, Ran website we have. Pilaman Paulus Jacob. Sudrana nakawa all minutes, Tal Korusia, Mangi, one ngitingit and to talk and all minutes, Nianso me buko, Ankin Patroyang, where and so was a o Kapayata, Mergot, at Medalong and Kolonia. Joe Henry. All minutes, then I mean Medalanim, Aposansel, me sang. Ni A Patroan Chikituk. Ichikita Patroan me Joe Henry in Patronan Kolonia. We had to talk. Umia Anso me E Aluara Biliang Yakyuki when Kolonia. Pan Patroan Tola o Patroan Ikin Susaya. And Ambassador Ertual Baba. Songan Olmenet o Olakay nan Kolonia me Tungalan Kipanene. Nene laut koko saner nan Kolonia warela. Ye isang anol bukat mayang utungata. Paita Lucious at kasapilto. Perinpulwat masaniang. Sang paan pod labanet. David Nelber. Ipatuan puriya mo ikilayral kan metay pita first list. Ekak manokala Tiger. David Nelber. Bill Liaman, Akina Philip, and Joe Philip, Wansi Philip, Araitungal Nono. Limanet, Philippine Sawas, Nianso, Mukit, and Kamakit, political division, and Koong Kolonia, Sang Waynet, Wiawi. Bill William Alter, and Masaro, O Wilson Aparail Tungal Papa. Olmanet, Tungal Sawas, Bill Loud. Atilino Sayola, Colonel Yoma, o isto patrawanta maran wasai rancho yokarete patrawantya na itungal list wasai kom kubra Takasi Lucious, Loren Le Pen, Olmenet, Emanolin Makil, Mapilsawasa, Loud Market and Wayne Kolonia. Catalino Actoga, Prinsley Lawrence, Mirip, Sang Parakiat, o Pearly Philip. Isangakan may patrawanta, asuto unsak, metroto. Troto aramas mamakitiki, ilak, iniralkan na patronan office. Mailang tiluway nan walinutskan, tiluway nan tupukan, rapagi panaramas. Ususwat pan wiyawi, wakikitailkan na patronan Kolonia. Kasawir o kasaneti, magkitail pan supplement kita, tungalan kita, government you, pan charter. Rimet, paramaskan may man kapatayan, Mr. Mayor, magatin kupra. List kan, o may nala, tail pan kakpurang to sa pali, kuya kasampal, magtail pan kasampal kiyaman, Mayor, tapilaman, mawiyat at talks to the Akatailan ka, katakatamanang sa pulmatail kan. Irail kan. Kakare, tiputawarail, hiti arail, matamataw, o ukita, where you makayu mangaranan. Amuin po. Liman patrawan pilikis, o patrawan, amenol. Metroto, sota kan, patrawan pagirail, kan rong at Willery Ikens. Bangko, Willery Ikens, Atroto Murin George Ikens. So is Hicken, Emanolin Mokil Mepasanet Akosanan Wayne Kolonia. Mowe o Bilianso me a charter la. Bill Iralkan Metropolitan ki business anso wa chaptasang me inoske. Kola Takasi Santos. Kola San Johnson. Wala Tomasiana Martin. Itay rail kanay pukat. Patro. Palisalan al. Palimainos ka patroye. Palipa magtailpan watakatala poniel apan chapter and George Higgins. Atolaren Ciro Palposa. Henry Nanpei. Martin Christian. Joseph Boas. Ioana Susaya. Berlin Soaltis. Cisco. Stewart Philip, Frederick Berman, Rayton Smith, Darling Barr, Atuan Manokala, Emanol, Rayton Smith. Sang nan kausan en railkan me chapto sang mutlak. Te papa kita nono ki railkan me. Kasuto sang mutlak i Emanol. Mesansal ki e makamagad ki Wayne Kolonia and Kokota.
That written to a petition to the UN. Ours, we decided that ours should be to the High Commissioner. So we wrote that paper, that Kolonia should be separated. And then we listed down the reasons for Kolonia to be separated. And it's in that paper for the Council. And Kozo and Takasi were very helpful because they were in the land office. You know, when the Germans started the administration here, one of its reform was to institute the land deed, So the land system in Pohnpei became changed because of the German land deed proposal, not proposal, but deed that they started. And in that land deed, it says something about Kolonia being a separate part under the Germans. And when the Japanese came, they continued that. And it was a special area in Pohnpei, not part of NET. So these were used in that letter, saying that Kolonia had when Le Pen NET gave away Kolonia, it had always been a separate part of Pohnpei, not part of NET. And that was our group, anyway, so we drafted that and we gave to the councilmen and they signed it and then sent that paper to ICOM. And soon after that, ICOM approved it and Kolonia was authorized to issue a charter of its own. NET never, of all the municipalities in Pohnpei, NET didn't accept a charter. They said, there's no way, we are independent, ICOM is not going to authorize us to be independent, but we have been independent. So NET never did get a charter. But Kolonia, then there was a question of what is Kolonia. Of course, we took down town, so Kolonia town. It just came up in the Kolonia leadership meeting about town and municipality. They're really the same thing. There's really no difference between a town. If you check the Webster dictionary, it's the same thing. But it's an autonomous part, separate of its own, one of the parts.
Besides writing a letter to the High Commissioner, there was an organized campaign to grow support for this idea of separation. This included clan leaders getting support from the people of Nech to help vote for the separation, and there was even a parade for people to show their support for the movement.
And the first time the people like pray or something like that they carrying a stick, something on top of the thing, and they march around in town, come all the way down to here and go back, you know, like that. So that's the time that, after that, then he become, you know, because when he started to be mayor, that's when they're doing that.
There was no act, massive act by anybody here in that Kolonia that were against what was going on. Everything was done, I would say, peacefully.
But not everyone agreed to the separation of Kolonia town.
Later on, what we are made to be men who go with the repent, sap on me, open to a document. Loud when that band chorala, I should a young punky, Kolonia, and we are away. Karasapay, we ban patron and Rama. Ranwat Nanway Namaraka, Mia town Nanway go. Mia way man to town Nanway Namaraka.
Traditional leaders in Pohnpei have always been the caretakers of the land that they oversee. The Nanmarki of Nech holds the title of Leben Nech, and this title has overseen the use of Kolonia town from before the Spanish occupation. It was during Spain's time that Nech gave the area of Meseniang to the Spanish to use for their administrative headquarters. It was passed down to successive foreign occupants, and Kolonia had, in a sense, been a separate place from Nech municipality for a long time. But during the Trust Territory times, when the U.S. administered the islands and sought to grow the concept of self-governance, the Namarchy of Nech, His Excellency Max Iriarte, faced a challenge that no other Namarchy has had to deal with before or since, that of losing part of his kingdom in the name of self-governance.
And you could understand the position of the Nech municipality or the kingdom wanting to retain it, and its value, significance in not only the traditional but economical, political arena. But I can only assume that all the other traditional leaders understood those things, to the economic, the political, the social importance of it.
That is different from the rest of the municipalities. The Namarchy was the magistrate. A very smart, very intelligent man. He was a member of the Ephesus Magistrate Convention. Senator Lucious was his young entrepreneur. And he always had with him the Constitution of Japan. He was getting his guidance from the Constitution of Japan. Maybe some concept of it. Very, very intelligent.
Although Namarchy Max Iriarte is no longer alive, we have a glimpse of how he felt personally about the separation of Kolonia town from Nech. Contained within a letter that he wrote to an anthropologist friend, Mr. Jack Fisher, dated in July of 1954, the Namarchy states,
"This behavior is very startling to the feelings of us men of Pohnpei, for we are unaccustomed to it, and it also is in opposition to the propriety of the land."
Furthermore, he says,
"Nearly all the people of Nech district have prepared to oppose the decision of the Kolonia people to the full extent that we are able. I am also at a loss about it, for I did not think that it was this sort of thing which the government of the Trust Territory came to do to us."
But it wasn't just talk that the Namarchy of Nech gave to show his disagreement with the concept of separation of Kolonia town. He put his words on paper and sent them to the United Nations.
I heard from the people that called our committee to draft that response, to send that response to the High Commissioner, that there was such a letter that was written to the UN. As you would know, every year or so, a UN visiting mission would come out, and they would go to the UN and make their report to the Trusteeship Council. High Commissioner then would go and testify before the Trusteeship Council on activities throughout that year. It was part of the petition. Every year, people, individuals, government or groups would send their petition to the UN. And so this was evidently, because I'm not sure what happened, but part of those kind of petitions. But what we heard when we met to draft the Kolonia response was that there was a request or petition from Nech government to the UN that Kolonia is part of Nech and should not be formed as a separate government. Yes.
However, the United Nations was located in New York and was very far removed from the events happening here in Pohnpei. The U.S. administration overseeing the Trust Territory was headed by a High Commissioner located in Saipan and had the authority to make certain decisions about what happened in the islands. So when the people of Kolonia town sought assistance for their separation from Nech, they went through the on-island district administrator and wrote a letter to the High Commissioner for support.
Even though it had been established the district administrator's office was still the #1 place that they went to and discussed everything, because it had to go through him up to the High Commissioner's office. Now I assume from that point that the High Commissioner and his Attorney General's office with the lawyers up there kind of sat around and decided what had to be sent to U.S. Congress and what they could just make a decision on.
Of course, the feeling would be just like anybody who is losing a important part of its government because of revenue loss and also the power that is so inherent in a people government. Yeah.
Yan so metatalkom na nutsin Kolonia nyamun Clarence opinion kay yan so me Israel alayer Kolonia town kama keter kosan pian opisin town eu ai da sabia takawa taksin yung ya opis na mina Kolonia ta Arenian so credit union bill patrola rail na opis anjo kosmas wal bakar ya son to talk credit union sang mokoto ilaya pa walio isinya kan ulian ral koto isu do patrowa ulian kosma ulian so sikena to.
In March of 1965, the Kolonia town government was established as a subdivision of Nech municipality by the High Commissioner through the approval of a charter. The granting of the charter to the people of Kolonia town as a political subdivision was a result of a hard and long campaign launched by prominent leader residents of Kolonia town to achieve complete political autonomy from Nech municipality.
And Kolonia is a separate entity with its own constitutional government, and so that's what defines Kolonia itself. It is a constitutional government operated by its own government, and it's not part of Net. Net can claim that it is traditionally and culturally part of Net, because it has been in the past. They call this Kolonia as one of the Pohnpei Messenia. They still claim that, but legally that claim is no longer true because of the separation of power and as far as constitutional power and as far as people of Kolonia taking control of their own lives.
The preamble of the Kolonia Town Charter says, whereas the representatives of the people of Nech Municipality, Island of Pohnpei, in the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, have stated their desire for a town government of Kolonia to express the will of the people in the government of that town, and whereas the United States of America has agreed by the ratification of the trusteeship agreement for the former Japanese-mandated islands to promote the development of the inhabitants of the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands towards self-government, and whereas the people of Kolonia Pohnpei Island recognize the government of the United States of America as the administering authority under the terms of the United Nations trusteeship agreement, and whereas the people of Kolonia Pohnpei Island subscribe to the principle that all men and women are created free and equal, and that no person shall be banned from any rights and privileges of Kolonia because of race, color, sex, or religion. Now, therefore, I, Delmas H. Nucker, acting High Commissioner of the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, do hereby charter the people of Nech Municipality, Island of Pohnpei, Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, to elect a town government for Kolonia to assist the government of that town as hereinafter provided.
As far as my knowledge of how Kolonia actually emerged, you could almost call it like an emerging nation, an emerging town, developing with not very much what I would call legal or official guidance. It was something that was just going to happen and did happen.
You mentioned that today in some of those people that were leaders in the movement for Kolonia to become a separate area, separate entity, are traditional leaders in many other municipalities today. Like Takasi is a high traditional leader, former Speaker of the Council, Kolonia, and now so Wasai and Madlani. And there are other traditional leaders nowadays that were involved in the movement. In fact, many of the people that were involved in the setting up Kolonia as a separate entity were from that. For many years, Pohnpei didn't consider this as a home Kolonia, because they were not living in this, the land that is now Kolonia. They were living in their own areas away from Kolonia. So this was a new move when U.S. took over these islands, and Kolonia became a place where Pohnpei can live. In fact, our land system in Kolonia is still undergoing change.
As Pohnpei was heading towards self-governance, the people looked to those who had left the island to receive a better education. Some went to Hawaii, the U.S. mainland, and Fiji. When Kolonia Town was looking for local leadership, it was these men and women who were called upon as early leaders.
Kolonia was chartered before it became a constitutional government. So it was chartered by the High Commissioner, and it's through that charter that the council was formed and then the mayor was selected.
Regan, Charles, Edwin, Victoria Edwin, Johannes Sam, or Marcelo, Peterson, Nanak Mueyo, Sabazoneti, Septalonger, Esantisang, Mayor Mon, Mayor Ricken, Victoria Edwin Kalata. Section A, then section issue. Sang A, then issue. Mayor, nan Victoria Edwin, Ususta sang, nan section 1. O Councilmen, Takasi, Lucious, Sons, Eldridge, sang nan Pingayu, Iki, we are representative in section 1. Sa Kit in Copenhagen o Itawen, Kosantian, Tame, Charter Government. Asa mo sa talong Songkoros Setir. Awiyawta o solar. Dikam winnet solar noon to na sa pwede uta to separation in power, right? Yeah. O nan constitution met nan charter government. You are Councilmen in charter government when
Sotele so parlia. Ite ikilang ada tame. Mumun roti. Follow the tame. Councilmen mowe ko pasoneti. O I me salah.
What I would attribute it to is the fact that they had already been identified as leaders by their island group constituents. You could call them constituents. And it just so happened that they all understood the goal of what they wanted to do, and they worked together at it. They were just very cooperative, even to the point of waiting for translators in some of their sessions. Even some of the Pohnpei representatives had Pohnpeian guys who had traveled or been well educated and could switch it all to English. It must have been very, all I know, I sat in at some of these sessions, were a bit, I don't want to say painful, boring, because it was slow. But they all had great patience. They all were, as far as I'm sure, there might have been some arguments behind the scenes that I've never heard about, but it was always impressive to me because they're from different places. They all had the same interest in starting something new, and having a chance to do it together meant basically that they had to cooperate with each other. And the only way to make a success of that was to work together.
Well, you know, if we, in contrast, if we say go back in the 1600, 1700, 1800, it would be the same thing as New York, where you have a lot of ethnic groups in that area, in that city, and to really work with different ethnic groups is really, it's a challenge. It's a big challenge. But then we learned how to work together and live together. And I think that was the beauty of Kolonia, because different ethnic groups getting together and then just working together under a constitution that recognizes equality. And I think when people know they're right, I think they will feel safe, secure, and can live with other ethnic people, other different culturally, traditionally, different language. It's just something that if I know I have my rights and I'm equal to you, regardless of race, ethnicity, language, and I think that's what brought together the common people in town to interact and become an entity that works together to promote that government.
Samiaso Yigis Simata Sola Town Siyanger Atem Tisu Kareta Play Kin Pohnpei Eutasan Pon Way Isake when Lan Constitution Government Some Course Me Milan and some charter government a Kasawi Nan when charter government less power Lamentation and unconstitutional government separation of power and even an Tarobe. Every way Pan Aniki Puman counta o papali sam nerai aramas inamen nerai aramas panguiata marketing government o kawata o tamdi o im
Kolonia is a very interesting place because it had people from almost all over the region. Yeah. Even people descendants of people from Papua New Guinea, from Japan, even from US, Philippines, and of course the islands of Pohnpei. I think every district then had their own representative in Kolonia, people who were either married or chose to live in Kolonia. Yeah, but the setup of the government then was very interesting because that's the hardest thing to do, to manage a government that has people from different cultures. But I think Kolonia did a good job, excellent job in trying to make sure these people are well treated. And I think that's why today you see more and more people from different cultural background living and working in Kolonia town.
If it was still under net, then it wouldn't be as fluid as it is today, where all the municipalities can come here and not feel like they're obligated to pay homage to, and it's more of a neutral area for people to come together.
And again, I go back to saying it's an emerging, growing town and city. It's very encouraging. Education has improved so much. Number of business offerings, so much better over the years. So it kind of reaches to the conclusion that the whole idea about establishing Kolonia town as a sixth municipality was a heck of a good idea.
Are ranwat may isa kisu. Ranwat dahil Kasarawi Charter and Kolonia town. A day to celebrate the success of an early political movement. One that was done without a charter, without a constitution, but by the will and by the determination of a people to form a separate governance for a distinctly diversified people. Kasamsal, mayrail kan magkatpana o sukata, misingis kisili, kolonyan, utorata, irail katsang pasatroto, masan troto, masan in kernis, masan in nukur, masan in penglap, masan in mukil, masan in Pohnpei, masan in wai, motlok. Ye met Mawiyata Kel and Kolonia, or Lingan and Kolonia.
After the Pohnpei State Constitution was signed in 1967, it laid out the island and listed the 6 municipalities on Pohnpei proper, cementing Kolonia town's status as a separate municipality and preventing any further divisions from happening in the future. It made Kolonia town's story of independence a truly unique story for Pohnpei's history on its path to self-governance. A story that should be remembered for the vision that those early leaders had to make a special place for everyone in Kolonia town.